Angie,
John.
have you ever heard of psychological safety?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it's super important in coaching.
Oh, not just coaching environments, right?
That's right. It's important in many professional environments.
Yeah, and maybe in some of our personal ones too.
It certainly does help.
How do you feel about making that today's topic for our show?
I am all in. Let's do it.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
All right, the coaching clinic is open, Angie, and today we're talking about psychological safety. It's such an important thing, and I think we hear it said a lot, but we perhaps don't always know what it means. So what do you understand by the term psychological safety?
You know, I think I overly simplify it because we could go deep, into the layers and in the spaces. But I think it's just really having the ability to have space where there's no fear of consequence within a relationship, within a conversation. So to me, it's really about that safe space to interact.
Yeah, there's having an environment where you can express yourself freely without fear of retribution, without fear of negative judgment, and you can actually speak your mind openly and honestly. I think that's super important. And perhaps when we put it in those terms, it makes it perhaps obvious why that's so important in a coaching environment. Because if our clients don't feel comfortable to open up fully to us, okay, that can take time, then we may not really ever get into any of the deeper elements to them. So how do you go about creating that environment for your clients?
I think I definitely know I do it right from the beginning. I think within a few sessions, maybe not even a couple of sessions, the client will get the feeling that they can trust me. Because when they say things, I'm not responding like everybody else in their life. I'm not answering just to answer. I'm not listening just to respond. And I'm hearing them. And there's things that I do. I think that there's skill set that kind of gets injected here so that you can, because you can't just say, hey, John, you're my new client. You should just trust me. I'm your coach. No. Trust is earned in any environment, especially a new one, because some people come into coaching, let's be honest, super they want to tell you everything. And then many people come in and they're guarded intentionally, and some are guarded without even recognizing that they're guarded. So I think the first thing that I do is just that I don't listen to respond. And then one of the skills is that I will repeat back, which is something we've talked about before. But repeating back and saying, even if I do understand, I might say, so is this what you're telling me? Is this what I'm hearing? And immediately even if they're like, no, that's not quite what I meant. Now it's a whole different interaction than they're used to. And I think that's the beginning, the foundation. So definitely that listening space.
I like to make it very clear in our first session that these are, we don't automatically have, for psychiatry or psychology, there's a pretty much automatic, in fact, ingrained, usually contractual non-disclosure, everything's kept private kind of agreement. And we don't generally have that officially in coaching. So I think it's good to have at least a verbal contract on that first call and just say, that I want you to know everything you say here is going to be kept within this session. And I think we have maybe covered that before now, of course, unless someone was talking about self-harming or, something that would be against the law or anything like that. want this to be a place for you to freely express yourself, to have a free voice, and to feel comfortable enough to be able to do that without fear of retribution or judgment in the session as well. And I have found over years, I feel that in some ways it's even more important now to be able to do that, just to understand that somebody could have that place where they can say what's on their mind. Because I think in the public forums of social media, people generally don't say what's on their mind. They say what they think is acceptable, or they say what the group wants them to say, or if they're like kids on the internet, or maybe mentality like kids, they're stirring the pot, but they're not in environments where they can actually really talk and open up.
So, so in my contract though, I do have a whole section that says basically that everything here is confidential unless, I think that there's some other issue, right? Something going on and we need to involve, the police or, But anyway, that's, I think, important to recognize. But I think that you're right. I think that, now more than ever, because not just in social media, but because of social media and the way things work, it's much more important for us to create that space and saying it, certainly. And I don't mean to say like, don't say it to them. I mean, I think saying it to them, like, this is a safe space, that, nothing, that definitely helps. I think that many people come into it though with a little bit of like, is this really going to be what I think it's going to be? And is she going to react? I think I told you once that I was coaching somebody, and it was a week after, with a follow-up. And I said, oh, that was really great. You did that. That was great. And when I asked for feedback at the end of the session, that client, which was very eye-opening for me, said, I really valued our session for this, and this reason, but I also felt judged. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, can you tell me, where, how? And she said to me, well, when you told me that I did a great job on XYZ. And I said, really? Keep going. I wanted to hear because I didn't understand it. And she said, well, whether you told me it was good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's still a judgment in my mind. That was a pretty eye-opening moment for me, where I realized that even if somebody does respond well to a cheerleader type of coaching, that expressing anything that can be received as like parental judgment, like, yay, great job, right? Or that was horrible. That was a pretty eye-opening moment for me. And if she didn't share that with me, it may have really kind of ruined the trust between us, even on the subconscious level, right? Even if she liked me and liked our coaching, it may have prevented her moving forward from sharing with me and being vulnerable, which is, as we know, the key to any coaching relationship. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bit of a perspective I take with this as well about just how important it can be to create these kinds of spaces for clients to be able to speed up that journey to deeper trust that does allow you to get into some of the deeper work that you may want to do together. I can say, as a gay man, although I'm out and openly gay, that's not true in every situation. So someone I just met, let's say I just started working with a coach and I didn't really know them very well, I might wait to tell them about my sexuality and my being married to a man. I might not, but it depends on how safe I feel with them. And there are clients who maybe do have something like that, or maybe they are non-gender conforming or trans or something like that, who do to some degree need to know that they can feel safe and welcome in your environment based on who they are, because these are characteristics that we have perhaps previously been abused for or even punished for just for being who we are. So it is important to be able to have that safety in your sessions for people who do have different characteristics.
Do you remember, I mean, I shared this on the show probably almost a year ago, maybe at this point, but you remember me telling you that I did have a client that came on in like session number 1. She'd rehired me, and session number 1, it was, I identify as a female anatomy. And I just
knew
want to
that's
know
exactly where you were going.
You set me up. You baited me. I don't feel safe. No, and I don't mean to poke fun, but listen, that could happen exactly that way. But that was, she asked me in that moment, like, are you okay with that? And I was a little stunned. I'm not lying at first. I was like, I've never experienced this before. And quickly my mind processed and I thought, okay, well, like any other thing, here's my question back to you. What does that have to do with your coaching journey? How will it affect it? Oh, I don't think it will. I said, okay, but if it does, like, I need you to make me aware, right? Like, if you show up as you, or you show up like it changed, it fluctuated, it was not like consistently. It was a little difficult to navigate, but the answer I gave her was satisfactory. We did a lot of coaching. We did probably like 3 or 4 rounds of coaching together. So you're talking about, 40 some odd sessions, hours together, and it never came up. But she wanted to make sure that, I guess, if it did in the future, 30 sessions in, I wasn't like going, wait, what are you talking about? She was very upfront and testing those waters. And I did not present judgment. I just went back to, okay, how does this affect our journey? Does anything that you want to work on revolve around that? And she said, oh no, I just want you to know. Okay. All right. Yeah, so let's move on. And she was a little surprised. She's like, well, that's not the most benign reaction I've ever gotten. And I said to her, well, it's not my job to react. It's my job to say, okay, this is who you are. It's like you telling me you're a banker or a lawyer. This is who you are.
Yeah. That would be my first thought as well. What is your intention in telling me this? How does this affect our coaching relationship? Totally. And even if I didn't ask it directly, I'm going to be thinking, what is your intention in telling me this?
Yeah.
And there may actually be depending on what's being said, there may be a conversation that has to come out, Brand, about the intention that's going on there and whether that is really what's important. I remember doing a supervised coaching session back in my early days of coaching, where it was being trained in NLP coaching. And in the session, the person I was working with, who was another NLP student, we were working with genuine stuff that we would work with in coaching sessions. So it wasn't just making stuff up for the sake of the session.
Yeah.
And this was someone who wanted to essentially not get any older, just to stop aging.
Okay, Peter Pan.
Yeah, and it was an interesting session because my take on it was the healthy place to go is to be okay with aging because you cannot stop it. You can perhaps slow down signs of aging, and maybe you can even slow down your aging to some degree. And I know there's this is many years on from that, but there's a lot of things going on scientifically now that are helping to do that. It's a big area of research, but it's not stopping people from aging.
Sure.
So the whole idea that you could even stop yourself from aging was a little ridiculous to me. And so I just took the whole thing from the thing of where I need to get her to is a place to being okay with aging, or okay with doing what she can, but accepting who she is right now, rather than resisting who she is right now. And essentially, she cried out of the session and said, I can't talk to you, I have no rapport with you, because I wouldn't go along with what I felt was somewhat delusional. If that makes sense. I just could not go along with that. Now, maybe there's a coach that could. I personally wouldn't say it's ethical as a coach to go along with that because it is somewhat delusional. But if you think that your client that you're working with is potentially delusional, you probably should stop the session. You probably should stop the session because it's not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
They're either not going to come across to where you want to get them to, or you're not going to be able to really support them in the session. And I think that's what I learned from that, even though the supervisor at times said, oh no, it was me who broke rapport. And I went away from it thinking, bullshit. It was a ridiculous concept to want to work on that because she cannot stop the aging process.
Well, you cannot stop time, period. Right. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you did this and maybe you didn't, but you know me, I'm like digging, define aging. I'd go through all of that, the I look to do that understanding, because sometimes we can't even, sometimes clients are so not used to being able to be open that they don't really even know how to identify first, and then articulate what they're actually feeling.
Oh, we did that because I wanted to really understood wanted to really understood what she meant by it, and that perhaps I was misunderstanding the context of what she was talking about. So we did dig deep into that.
Yeah. So I think that's ethically responsible to be able to say, you know what, because of where you're sitting and where your belief system being unrealistic, right? I mean, if I'm 80 years old, if I have somebody who's 75 years old that says, well, I'm going to be like the first woman on the moon, I'm going to say, probably not. I don't like to kind of kick people's dreams, right? But at the same time, there has to be a realistic conversation about it. And our job at that point, which is what you did, is to kind of really decipher that. Is this a reality? Or is this, like, again, delusion is a great word. I just love that. But yeah. And we have to be able to identify it. I mean, it just makes sense. We can't just keep going, okay, Betty, are you ready to, so what's next for you? How are you going to get to the moon?
Well, yeah, look, the reason why I think that's so important to bring into this psychological safety conversation is because this isn't just about appeasing people in your sessions.
Absolutely.
So, oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course you believe that. And because that is enabling. It's the psychology terminology. But you would really just be enabling them to continue that. Whereas perhaps if you're going to continue at all, the best thing you can do is try and help them at least define what it is they're talking about, and maybe even examine how realistic what they're talking about is. But that's probably the best you could really hope for if somebody is that determined to go on in that sort of manner. So I think it's super important in your coaching sessions to be able to distinguish. This isn't just about people like being able to say anything they want and you think, oh yeah, that's fine. Not always.
Yeah. I think too, you also have to be prepared as a coach that when you do, if you are able to build that trust, and listen, because if you really think about it, where can people, I mean, I'm hoping, right? My hope is that when people are at home with their significant, their family, it could be their children, their spouse, whomever, their partner, that they have psychological safety there, right? To be able to express how they feel in a healthy way, we hope, so that, interaction and communication can happen. But I think that my experience, and I'm going left here, I'm going hard left, John, so you can come with me. I hope you do. But I think one of the spaces where I see it coming up with my clients the most, where it's difficult for them, is in a work relationship. That professional relationship is a little bit different. I think that there's a lot less psychological safety in the workplace because of politics and, the way it works. But that creates an intense amount of stress and anxiety for people. And it's something they have to do every single day. Right? They can't just say, hey, I want to take my partner to dinner. We have some important things to discuss. And I'm not saying that it's every leader that doesn't allow for it, but there's this kind of belief system, I think, where, you have to watch what you say and how you say it, because it's just not acceptable. And there isn't a lot. And I've experienced this time and time over and over, men and women, over and over.
All right. And even with, say, as much as some companies may sort of outwardly and openly be progressive in that sort of sense, as like, oh no, we work to have a solid work culture with psychological safety and all of that. Just because they say it doesn't necessarily mean in practice that they follow through and do it.
Yeah.
So I can understand that even if that's a policy, you may still want to tread carefully unless you've actually seen evidence. And this is, I think, the most important part with this. Unless there is evidence that there is actually a genuine culture of psychological safety, then you should assume otherwise. Because it has to be demonstrated that you can speak freely without fear of judgment or retribution for what gets said, that it ends up coming back on you in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's the big difference. Like, if you're in a company that says that or organization that says that they do this, is there evidence that they actually do follow through and do that? Because if there isn't, then you may still want to tread carefully, because otherwise it's a bit of a company buzzword. Everyone's talking about psychological safety. They really need to think about it,
yes,
but it's not always being practiced as it should be.
Yeah, no, and yes, then that's definitely the truth. So let me ask you a question. So, in terms of being a coach and being aware of creating that, what other skill sets do you think are necessary? Because I think it's a skill set. I don't think it's something that always comes naturally to people, because some coaches want to be the fixers where they just want to give the answers, which you and I have agreed that's not really coaching. That's more like consulting. And maybe, maybe that's how their business is set up, that they do a little bit of both, and that's fine. But what's another actual skill that you practice? Like, have you ever caught yourself I'm not going to use the term, but like kind of in your mind as a client might be talking or sharing something with you where because we are naturally judgmental as humans. So do you ever find yourself kind of going in that direction and then having to go, no, I have to reset and recalibrate here?
There are times, certainly or I've caught myself thinking, hold back your judgment here. You don't know. You don't really know. And you don't have this person's personal experience. You don't, even if they're telling you a story and it seems like they perhaps didn't act in the best way, or they weren't particularly ethical, or something that doesn't show them in a good light. I think you still have to try and assume that they were doing the best they could with the resources that they have available to them at that time. And sometimes you have to remind yourself of that. And I certainly do. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that. So we may get somewhere down the line with me starting to form some judgments and then having to pull myself back from it. And certainly before I open my mouth.
Did you ever I have had this. I've had this several times. And it could be on something like, because I don't know what you do, but I always give action steps at the end of a session. Like, okay, we talked about this, and here's a couple of things, and this is what you're going to work on. But what I've noticed sometimes is that my clients will come back to me and say, like, they'll get into the session and go, oh my gosh, Angie, I am so sorry. I didn't do this. And I could just go, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it, next time. And I don't go into that space, because what I'm doing is I'm buying in and validating this apology. Like, they owe me something, right? So that's another space where I feel like when you come back, so my answer will be, there's no apology necessary here, right? Let's talk about what happened, right? You do not answer to me. I'm here as your guide. Who you need to answer to is yourself.
Yeah.
So what happened? Is there something that could have been done differently? Like, I go right back into coaching, but I try to separate that so that they don't feel like, oh my God, Angie's going to be so mad at me. What?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I will make it clear. It doesn't make a difference to me personally whether you've done your action commitments or not. It doesn't. But it does make a difference to you, because it's going to affect how you feel when you've done them or not. Then what I don't want you to do is to beat yourself up about not having done them.
It's like a shame or something. Go ahead.
The only valuable thing for us to do is to take a look at what did and didn't happen and see if we can learn from it and grow from it.
Great.
That's it.
So listen, but when you do that, and when I've done that with clients, that will 10 times, 10x, right? That trust level goes up so much higher, and it actually allows that person to begin to practice being realistic and honest, and not trying to go, I didn't do it, right? Like, it's always it's that shaming or something. And again, this isn't Psych 101, right? We're coaches. So
but it's a good example of how much we generally live in fear of other people's reactions.
Yes.
And we nearly always tend to imagine other people's reactions as being far worse than they usually ever are. Unless you do happen to encounter people who are massively reactionary and explode at the slightest things. Those people tend to be in TV dramas, because that's what drama's all about. If you encounter that in real life, it might not be you that's the problem. is all I'm saying.
I had a client years and years ago who was unfortunately, and I worked with this person for years, and this person was suffering through physical abuse in her relationship. And like, I'm not even joking, probably 36 sessions in, that's why I think I kind of referenced this earlier, kind of came in and said, Angie, I'm just not feeling it today. I had a bad night. I don't think I want to do the coaching call. And I'm at that moment, I'm not going to be like, oh, okay. I'm like, why? Why are we kind of resisting this? Anyway, she did end up telling me, I haven't been completely honest with you, and this is what's happening. And my knee-jerk reaction, and I didn't do it, but the first thought that came to my head was, what did I not do? Why didn't I have the space, hold enough space for her to come to me sooner? And I quickly kind of put that out of my head, saying it's not my responsibility to make her. I can't drag everything out of her. Right. And it took her that 30 some odd hours to feel comfortable enough to share that level. So understand what my point in bringing this up is that, you don't get all the trust right away. Now, when I say trust is built and earned, and then it's built, right? The more time this person spent with me, the more trust she had in me. And it took her that many hours to be able to come forward with that information. And part of me, of course, wanted to scream out, you can tell me anything. This is the safe space, right? I wanted to say that, and I did not. But what I recognize is that nothing was really wrong. That's the time it took. That was the level of trust required for her to get to that level of vulnerability with me. Yeah. And that was another big aha moment for me. Like, the trust doesn't come in all at once in any one particular session. It really does stack.
No matter how well you hold the space, some people are going to feel comfortable right away, and they're just going to, as you said, they're just going to tell you the most intimate details right off the bat. Some people are like that. They get that trust sense very early on, and they're going to go straight in there. And it may even be situational. It might not be every case that they do that. There's maybe just with you, they've connected and they feel comfortable enough to do that. And some people are going to take a longer time to develop the level of trust that they need to get to. And that could be all sorts of things that you may have to wait to really find out what the trust issues are, and or what's stopping them from, or what's holding them back from being able to have that deeper trusting relationship. But if they're sticking with it and they're continuing to work with you, it should come. And so trust yourself as a coach here to keep holding the space. And it doesn't mean you're not doing anything, that you're doing something wrong as a coach. Sure. It just means you may have to be patient, as you're saying, and just hold out for
exactly. I was just thinking that. I'm like, I think one of the things that we're so interested as coaches, or we're so focused on building rapport because it's so important to the process, that we lose patience. And I think that if we're really doing it right, we are patient. I mean, again, we have different every client has, comes in different shapes and sizes. Some people you can work with for 10 years and really just still scratch the surface because we're so complex as human beings, and there's still positive work being done. But at the same time, I think we as coaches lack that patience sometimes because we're just trying to get to it, Anyway, so yes, I think, one of the other great ways to build that trust is to be patient and to meet people where they are. If you're standing on the ledge with somebody, you can't just go, come on, we're going to jump. That scared, no, I'm looking over a ledge. I don't think I like that. That's not going to work for me.
I feel that if you understand what psychological safety is and why it matters, why it's important, we should be doing all we can, not just in our coaching sessions, but in many parts of our lives as possible, to have at least a sense of that's what's there. To be able to try, do our best to try and create environments and a feeling around us where people feel that they do feel a level of psychological safety, that they don't feel judged, they don't feel criticized, that we can do that in many parts of our lives. We can, even if it is in professional places where we don't have, where there is no guarantee of cultures being worked on or psychological safety, maybe we can at least start to create some of that in our teams or with our groups of people, so that people have some degree of that, and that could be could potentially have a greater influence out into other areas and groups as well. I think it undoubtedly will. So I think this is a really important topic. Maybe you have some thoughts on psychological safety that we haven't covered today, or maybe you have some questions that you'd like to ask me and Angie here at the Coaching Clinic. You're very welcome to do that. You can send us a voicemail or a video message on LinkedIn, and you can find both of our profiles in the show notes for this episode. And you can also leave us a voicemail. Go to www.speakpipe.com/the Coaching Clinic podcast. And you can leave us up to 90 seconds of voicemail for free with your question, your comments, and anything you'd like me and Angie to address in a future episode, and we will feature you on the show. But we're going to close the Coaching Clinic for today, and we'll be back again to open our doors next Wednesday. See you then.
Bye for now.